Good afternoon, everybody. We're talking about adding fractions, and as you might tell, we might be talking about unlike denominators. I actually can't tell from that because I didn't write anything about that yet. But I'm going to talk more about unlike denominators rather than just like denominators, because that's something that you talked about in elementary school, and we're in middle school now, so let's get with it. There are some steps that I'd like you to follow, and I'd encourage you to take a pause and write these down, because we're going to get right into solving some of these. And I'll also give you a pause point on the next board too. Okay, here we go. We'll take a look at a couple of examples, and like I said, I encourage you to pause now and work them out yourself, and then if you want to see if you're correct, you can go back and verify your work. We have 1/4 plus 5/7. We have two different denominators. We have a 4 and we have a 7, and it looks to me that we would need to do some multiplication possibly to figure out what our common denominator could be. I'm not as worried about having a least common denominator, which is the smallest denominator that you could possibly have between those two fractions. I'm more worried about, can you find a common denominator? Let's not worry about the fact that it's the least one. Let's worry about if it's just a common denominator. We can do the extra simplification work, if necessary, at the end of the problem. That shouldn't be a problem for us. I see that I have 4 and 7. And when I look at 4 and 7, I like to think to myself, well, if I multiply those, hold this up, if I multiply those, I will get 28. And that looks like a good common denominator, and actually it is the least common denominator. Now by doing that, I have left myself 2 blanks for my numerators. And I can do this a couple different ways. I can cross multiply, which would say that 1 times 7 would be 7, and 4 times 5 would be 20. Or I can say to myself, how many times must I multiply 4 to get to 28? And that would be 7. So I would have to multiply this by 7 and multiply my numerator by 7 to maintain that balance. But if you look at your cross products, you realize that you're already multiplying by 7. So in any event, 7 needs to go in that blank. Same thing for the other one. 4 times 5 is 20. And if I say to myself, what can I multiply 7 by that would get me 28? We would be correct if we said 4. So I would have to multiply 5 by 4 as well to maintain that balance and to keep the value of the fraction the same. But if you look at your cross products, you see that you're already having to multiply by 4. So let's just multiply 4 times 5 and get ourselves 20. At this point, I have a common denominator. I've already changed numerators and I've already gotten a common denominator, so I've kind of done 2 steps in one here. I'm going to add now. So 7, I'm going to add my numerators. And actually, I'm going to add that to my list right here. So I'm going to say add numerator. A little bit off the board, but that's okay. 7 plus 20 is going to be 27, and my denominator stays the same. I don't add my denominators. Please don't do that. That's going to get you the wrong answer. And I look at this and I see that they have nothing in common factor-wise. I can't divide them both by 2. I can't divide them both by 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. So I'm going to leave it alone and say that this is my answer. If I look at a mixed number example like 2 and 3/8 plus 1 and 7/10, I realize that, again, I don't have a common denominator. I have to find one. And I'm looking at both of those, and I know I can multiply 8 times 10, but I could also do something else. I could also think of a number that goes into, or that the 8 and 10 both go into, division-wise, and I feel like 40 might be a good answer for that, because I know 8 goes into 40 evenly, and I know that 10 goes into 40 evenly. So I could do that if I want to, and that would give us a smaller problem to work with. My preference is just to multiply these two together, and 8 times 10 is, I hope you know that, that's going to be 80. So I'm going to write this just like that. I have my whole numbers that I carried down. We have nothing to do with those but add them later on. And I have 80 denominators. Now again, I can cross multiply, and I can say 3 times 10 is 30. 8 times 7 is 56. And I have this really big looking question now. But don't be afraid of the numbers. The numbers are there just because we put them there. If I have a common denominator, and I have these whole numbers I can add up. I can add up my whole numbers. I can say that I have 3 and I have an 80 denominator. Keep that the same, and I have 30 plus 56. That is, I realized that that is improper. I'm going to have to convert that. How many times will 80 go into 86? Just once. And I have 6 left over. So this improper fraction will give me 1 and 6/80ths. I've got to add that 3 on there though. So actually I have 4 and 6/80ths. 4 and 6 over 80. That's not done yet. What can we do? I think we can simplify. These are both even numbers. I can divide them both by 2. And if I do that, I get 4 and 3/40ths, which is kind of a weird answer, but it is still the correct answer. And it is the simplified answer. So folks, all we're doing is we're trying to find a common denominator. We want to make sure that our numerators are also changed so that they keep the same value as that new denominator. We don't want to change values. If we do, we're wrong. We're going to add our numerators. We leave our denominators the same. We should probably put that there. And it might be a good idea to write that in your notes. Keep the denominators the same. And I'm going to have to simplify and convert if necessary. I don't always have to do that, but I have to do that when necessary. Many more examples can be found in your textbook. Many more examples can be found in your classroom. So ask questions, ask for examples, and don't be afraid to ask the tough or easy questions. Have a good day.